I see some names that I don't recognize, so maybe it's just a good opportunity for our NeuroCatch staff to just quickly introduce ourselves, just so that we're all familiar. So I'm Sean. I'm the NeuroCatch clinician out in BC, and my background is in exercise physiology, and now I'm also working as a kinesiologist with the Surrey Neuroplasticity Clinic. So if there's any questions that ever come up, you can always feel free to reach out to me. Tanya, can we just give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. I'm Tanya. I also recently started working for NeuroCatch and Surrey Neuroplasticity Clinic. I'm on Vancouver Island. I'm a physiotherapist by nature and have a lot of background in neurology and neuroscience as well.
Awesome. Steph?
And I'm Steph. I'm the clinical sales lead at NeuroCatch. I work alongside these beautiful people and yourselves, helping clinics out with a lot of different things. So I'm also available to you.
Awesome. And lastly, but not least, we have Stace, who's on the road right now, but she can maybe just give a quick introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy. I'm the NeuroCatch clinician in the East. So I'm based in Ontario. I'm presently outside of NeuroChangers. We have Matt on the call as well with us today from NeuroChangers as I'm joining them later today. I'm an OT by background, and I am in a snowstorm. So it seems like snow is the theme of the day. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for joining us. So we have Stephanie from iHealth. We have Adriana from Rehab and Performance, Marcella and Dr. Klein from Klein Medical. Dr. Yan, who's one of our partners at HTC, and we have Leah and Anaf and Matthew. I hear Matthew is from NeuroChangers. I'm just curious which clinics Leah and Anaf may be from. If
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. I'm just on a different computer. I'm at Apollo Physical Therapy in Ottawa.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm from Neophysio in London, Ontario.
Neophysio from London. Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for joining us. This is our first brain camp, and we'll be running these bi-weekly, as you know. We're going to start off today with talking about brain and body, and 2 weeks from now we'll be talking about brain and business. And of course, these are broad, overarching themes, and it's that way on purpose so that we can cover a lot of different areas based on our expertise. So today we're going to be talking about the factors that affect these event-related potentials that we measure. I'm going to guess that everyone here can see my screen right now. So as we're going along, if you have any questions or if any comments come up, please feel free to just shout out. I can't see everyone's faces right now as I've got my eyes on the presentation, so I may not be able to see or understand or anything like that. So if anything comes up, please just speak up. And just a reminder that this is currently being recorded so that it's available on our client portal afterwards for anyone who couldn't be here with us today. If for any reason you feel uncomfortable with this being recorded, please shoot me a private message on here so that we could stop the recording if that prevents you from engaging with us fully. With that being said, I'll get started. The goal for us today, as I mentioned, is to talk about the factors that affect the event-related potentials that we're measuring. I want to start off talking about it broadly, the general factors that affect the event-related potentials, and then I'll dive a little bit further into each one, simply reminding everybody what they are, what we're measuring there, and some of the factors that affect each one of them. With the team members on here, there we go, the beeping sounds good. Yeah, so if we're all at different stages of using NeuroCatch. So some of this may be review for some of you. Some of you, this may be new information. So if there's anything that comes up that's unclear, please stop me and we can talk about it. So before we get into the factors of the ERPs, I just want to quickly talk about when we use event-related. And, you know, it's simply listed out here. I'll just read out a few of them. So you may want to use these event-related potentials when clinical presentation or symptomology suggests attentional or cognitive deficit. Actually, sorry, I'm just going to stop myself. If there's anyone, if I may just request that you mute yourself. I'm just getting some feedback as I'm going along here. So I'll just request for that you're just on mute unless you have a question. Thank you. So yeah, just going back to this, it's really important that you can use these event-related potentials when you're having or attentional or cognitive symptomology is unclear, or if treatment and intervention is likely to impact it and or cognition. Some of the reasons for not to use or when not to use it. If these assessments are causing discomfort or concern to your client, then of course we can't force NeuroCatch upon them. And an example is if they have terrible hearing sensitivity and noise sensitivity, and the tones that they're hearing is causing them tremendous discomfort, then of course it's fine to pivot away and rely on other assessments. And just lastly here, the last bullet point, if treatment and intervention is unlikely to impact attention or cognition, then using event-related potentials and NeuroCatch in particular may not be most suitable. I just want to broadly talk about exercise and its effects on attention and cognition here on this slide. And this slide is to broadly show how exercise or physical rehab in general can improve someone's attention and or cognitive processing levels across different types of diagnosis. And if you're on this call, chances are you're probably working with somebody who has a diagnosis that's listed on here. And one of the main, so this list is a compilation of these that study exercise results of attention and cognition. And there's a really few commonly recurring themes that come up. And it's that proposed physical activity, in particular aerobic exercise, through a number of positive effects, has positive effect on blood biomarkers, physiology, psychological factors are associated with cognitive functioning. And one of the other common themes that come up is the uptick of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is a protein mainly synthesized in the neurons. And early evidence shows that BDNF participates in cognitive processes as measured at the hippocampus. And this neurotropin is a reliable marker of brain function. So exercise induces that uptick of BDNF. And other studies in here found that exercise training increases a gray matter volume in your prefrontal cortex, temporal lobe, hippocampus.
I'll just spell it. So it's CHAITONS.
Sean, it's the neurochangers, the Matthew Chances people are not muted. They're interfering.
Yeah.
Sean, you can mute them. Hold your mouse over top of their. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry, Matthew. I don't know if you're hearing this, but I had to mute you there. Yeah, sorry about that. So all that just to say that if you have a client, no matter their diagnosis, if they're capable without exacerbation or without putting them, in an uncomfortable state, get them moving, because exercise alone, without even targeted cognitive training, can improve your client's attention and cognitive processing, no matter their diagnosis. I'm going to move into the general factors that affect the event-related potentials. And the first one that we see here is age. And age is a big one where when I'm working with a client, that's one of the first things that I consider. Generally speaking, our brains are at their physical and optimal state when we're in our late teens and early 20s. So unfortunately, a lot of us are kind of past that optimal point in our lives where our brains are functioning and firing on cylinders. So it's important that we do all the things necessary to make sure that we stay sharp as we progress and as our brains go through the degenerative effects that happen as life goes on. So again, age, one of the big factors. And as we get older, we see this degenerative effects, and we can see that the amplitudes generally decrease over time. And as well as the latencies also get slower. So we see slower cognitive processing as we go and as we age. The next factor here, this is more of a lifestyle factor. So caffeine. Let's all just, personally, I have a coffee every morning. I'm sipping on a coffee right now, and you can imagine why I feel that, why I, drink coffee in the morning. It's to feel sharper. It's to be more attentive, and generally speaking, that seems to help with cognitive processing. And I know a lot of us like to have caffeine in the mornings for those same reasons. So coffee, or caffeine in particular, will show an effect of larger amplitudes and faster latencies, so faster processing speeds. The reason this gets mentioned is because I think it's important for us to all consider, as people who use NeuroCatch, that when we're scanning somebody, that we want to keep things as consistent as possible. It's not absolutely imperative that if somebody has a coffee now before their scan, that next time they have a coffee before their scan. But it's just one of many things that we want to consider and keep consistent as we run these scans. Alcohol also has an effect on these event-related potentials in the acute phases, especially. And alcohol is one of those things where it's a law of diminishing returns, because personally, after a drink, I may feel more perky and a bit more upbeat, and a lot of us might also feel that way. But as we intake more alcohol, we can generally see that the amplitudes will decrease will decrease, and we'll see a slower processing speed. So our latencies will also increase, meaning that our processing speed is slower. Lastly, this is the other really big one. It's sleep. We all know how it feels to have poor sleep, right? Where we're not as sharp, we may be foggy, our processing speed is slower. And that is something that we can see on NeuroCatch scans. If we're fatigued, we're going to generally have smaller amplitudes and slower latencies, so slower processing speeds. So if you see that your client is showing a slower latency compared to what you think somebody might be at that age range, then you can start to wonder, as clinicians, what kind of things that we can address. And one of the biggest things, and one of the most important things that I always like to emphasize with my clients, is that they're sleeping well. So if sleep hygiene is not something that you are working on in your current practice, please make sure that that is something that you hone in on with your clients. And I work closely with a few occupational therapists who have some great resources with sleep hygiene that I could pass along. So if that's something that's of interest to you, please send me an email, and I'll send you over all the sleep resources that we have at our disposal.
And I think our next brain and body brain camp is actually going to be on sleep. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a really good point. So a month from now, we'll be doing the next brain and body brain camp will be based on sleep hygiene. So if you want to learn more about that and the science of sleep, please do tune in there as well. As long as no one has any questions, I'll move on to the next slide. So I talked about age, and in this particular image that you see, we're seeing the changes of our P300 amplitude over the course of our lives. So as you can see here, I'm guessing you can see my cursor move around. As I mentioned, our brains, they're in that optimal state. We're in our late teens, early 20s. That's when we see the greatest neuronal network and synchronicity of neurons firing at the same time that allows this large amplitude to be built. And this particular image is actually really great at showing you the wide range of outcomes that's possible. So for example, I'm 29, so I'm probably right in that area there. And for a 29-year-old, it's not, it's not rare, or sorry, it's not uncommon for somebody to have an amplitude of, say 3, 4, 5 microvolts, all the way up to 35, 36 microvolts. So there is a big range, and we provide that table of expected norms where the P3 amplitude can be between 2 to 40 microvolts. And some of the feedback that we get from clinics is that, hey, that's such a wide range. It seems too big. Well, it's a big range because it simply is a big range of outcomes that we see with our clients. What's important with us here with NeuroCatch is that you're not comparing your results to other people, and that and the focus that we want to see, the focus is on how we change within ourselves or within the clients over time. And though that normative range is provided, it's important that we're not comparing ourselves to other values, much like we wouldn't compare my blood pressure to your blood pressure. So as we can see, the amplitudes, they peak in that late teens and kind of get, the amplitudes decrease as we age. Same idea with the P3 latencies as we age. Just in the opposite shape, it's more of a Nike shape here. So again, in that late teens, early 20s, we can see that our processing speed is at its quickest. When we're really young, in the toddler stage, we can see that your brain just isn't developed enough for you to be able to process these things very quickly. Then we mature, we get into that optimal state, and then as we age, our processing speed gets a little bit slower. I have this slide here just to expand on what I was talking about earlier about not comparing yourself to others, but also just to see the change in yourselves. But in addition to that, one of the few things that we look for when we're interpreting and analyzing results, we want to look at a few different things. Not only do we want to look at the value, the amplitude, and the latencies, but we also want to see that there's a stable response shape that forms over time. It's really difficult to get a good understanding of your client with one scan. So as you scan your clients more and more, do notice that the stable shape does get formed, as it's really important. And if you're seeing erratic waveforms being formed from time to time, from one point to the next, it's important to, as clinicians, start to critically think why that might be. So again, we're looking at the waveforms, the timing and amplitude of each waveforms to get a qualitative and a quantitative assessment of how our clients are doing. Just at the bottom here, we're just showing that anything below 1 microvolt is statistically undetectable. And here we're given the just an average range of what you can expect, but again, always making sure that you're client focused and not focused too much about where they are relative to others. I want to just quickly give a reminder as to what each one of these ERPs are, and then we'll talk about the factors that affect each one. So the N100, we're looking at auditory sensation, right? This is pre-attentive perception of sound. And this is essentially acknowledgement by your brain that sound is entering your system. And some of the factors that might affect our auditory sensation has, of course, a lot to do with our hearing. And it varies with perceived intensity level of the stimulus. And the key word there is perceived, or perception of sound. The volume and the decibels of the tones that are being played, that's set, we know what it's at, but it's your perception of this sound that's going to affect what we see with the NeuroCatch results. So one of the big factors that affect the N1 is your hearing and auditory processing, and if there's an impairment to it. Generally speaking, if you have poor hearing, then you're going to see slower latencies and smaller amplitudes. I have an image down here on the bottom left of what you might see in an individual with poor hearing. And if you're seeing that you get an amplitude of 0.91 microvolts, like you see in this example, then that's statistically insignificant, and you may either want to rescan, or this may not be an appropriate scan considering this is an auditory stimulus. And of course, just a reminder that having hearing aids in as you're doing this is a contraindication, so please refrain from doing that. Processing impairments, yeah, so that's with the less than 1 microvolts. And another one is, so in addition to poor hearing, if you're on the other spectrum of things and if you're having noise sensitivity, you might see this large amplitude, very quick latencies, and that's more of, that might signify more of a knee-jerk, unpleasant reaction to this tone. So that's often seen in some of the concussion clients that I work with. After the concussion, one of the common symptoms is sensitivity. And just to make things a little bit more practical, with each ERP, after talking about the factors, I provided a little resource on some of the ways that you can address that with your clients. So with this particular handout here, we're talking about how to increase noise exposure for somebody who has noise sensitivity. And this image just kind of lays it out simply where you can start and what you want to progress up to. So for somebody who's fresh out of a traumatic brain injury and they have noise sensitivity, the best way to start with them to increase their noise exposure is by exposing them to white noise or nature sounds, right? Things like the sounds of rain or birds chirping or waves or whatever it may be. And then you want to progress it up slowly to exposing them to music without lyrics, then up to music with lyrics to increase the difficulty of processing. And then ultimately you want to expose them to language noise. And an example of that is having them listen to the radio or tuning into television or, to watch TV, listening to a podcast while they're cooking, something like that. So you want to make sure that you can progress them up slowly. Start with the lowest level of tolerable noise and pleasant sounds with low volume in a short amount of time. And as we want to make it harder, layering sounds and adding language seems to be the good way to progressively overload and help improve the noise sensitivity after sustaining a traumatic brain injury or any other types of injuries. Going on to the P300, so just another reminder of what this is. This is what we call the AHA response. And the P300 is also elicited using the tones. And it's elicited using what's called the oddball paradigm, where a sensory stimulus affects your response to the next stimulus. So as you hear the lower, the quieter tones, the beep, 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 your brain comes to expect that tone. And then once you get thrown with that oddball tone, that louder beep, we see if your brain is able to pick that out and dissociate the two tones and differentiate the different auditory tones that you're hearing. So generally speaking, we're expecting between 250 to 500 milliseconds and an amplitude of 2 to 40 microvolts. Some of the factors that affect the P300, generally speaking, the P300 is going to be the most variable from day to day. It has the greatest response to some of our lifestyle factors, such as caffeine or alcohol or sleep and exercise. And if you're one of the factors that may affect the P300 is cognitive impairments. So if somebody is showing mild cognitive impairments, they'll likely show slower latencies and smaller amplitudes. And other additional deficits may lead to a more difficult time dissociating between the two tones and an impaired processing speed that shows a delayed response. I don't know if you're able to chart on the right here. I understand that the font is quite small on this, but here's another long list of the factors that affect it. Again, we're going back to exercise, things like fatigue, drugs, caffeine, alcohol, age. And as part of the training package, one of the things that Steph on the call right now spent a lot of time putting in hours to make sure that we have a simple document where it shows some of the factors that affect the event-related potentials and an associated arrow up or down to show what you might expect. That's something that we recommend that you just print out and have next to you, next to the device, and as a quick reference sheet as to what you might expect with some of the factors that might affect your particular client. And again, just I just wanted to provide an example of some of the ways that we can help train our attention levels. And this particular recording here, this is a way for us to train selective attention, as this is what we're measuring with NeuroCatch. So I'm going to play this for everyone to listen to. Here, you're going to be asked to clap after you hear a number that is one number lower than the previous number. So for example, you're going to hear 7, 6, 5. And when you hear 5, it's one lower than the previous number of 6, then you're going to clap. That may sound easy, and to make it harder, you're going to hear a lot of background noise. And it's your ability to drown out the competing noise and focus on the task at hand that's going to train your selective attention. So I'm going to play this and see if you can give it a go.
Sean, I think the sound won't come through because it might be competing with the sound of you talking.
Were you able to hear that recording as I played it?
No.
Okay.
So we all had our selective attention on you talking.
Okay, that's unfortunate that I couldn't get that sound to.
We could probably send out the link to that audio
Yeah.
after the session. Yeah, that would be
Do
fine.
that. Okay. I'm sorry that that didn't go as planned, but I will send you this link that allows your participants to train their selective attention through auditory input. So with that part being unsuccessful, I'll just move on. We're going to talk about the N400 here, and this is high-level cognitive processing. And the N400 here is elicited using the spoken word pairs, and this is done so through priming, where when we're talking, every time you hear something, you're already automatically programmed to be predicting the next thing that's being said. So to elicit that N400, we deviate from that and provide word pairs that are incongruent to throw you off, and we see your brain's reaction to this. And this is high-level cognitive processing through recognition of awkward word pairs. And so this is semantic processing, language processing. And some of the factors that may affect this, the big one is, of course, language comprehension. And if your clients are not fluent in English, it may be tough to get a true, accurate reflection of an N400. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't use the NeuroCatch if they're not fluent in English. You can still get a good P1 or an N1 and P300. So it is ideal that your clients are fluent in English, and that's a big factor that influences it. Another factor here is the learning effect. So NeuroCatch has 6 different auditory sequences, as I'm sure you're aware, and we ask that you cycle through these. So if it's their first scan, run the first recording, second scan, run the second recording, and so forth. And just a teaser into what's ahead in future editions. There won't be any issues with this, so there's just going to be an infinite word pairs for us to listen to. So that won't be a factor for much longer. Another factor is attentional allocation. So your client may not be focused or actively listening. If your client is focused on what they're going to be making for dinner that day, or the chat that they had with their friend, and not paying attention to the word pairs, then you're not going to get as accurate of a result. So it's really important that when you're running these scans to really emphasize paying attention to the word pairs. And if you're seeing that they're not, one thing that you can do, and that we've suggested to our clients, is to try to count the number of loud tones that you hear within the 6-minute recording. That way, we're giving them a small, not difficult task for them to stay tuned in and focused, rather than having their mind elsewhere. Other factors that may affect the N400, things like traumatic brain injuries, we're going to see a delayed cognitive processing. And it's not necessarily a showing of decrease in language comprehension, but just an overall decreased processing speed. And you'll also see a smaller amplitude as you see, or as you note, cognitive processing impairments. Many ways that we can do targeted training for cognitive remediation. And one of the things that I like to do with my clients is to work on abstract thinking, as we're hearing all these single words with priming to elicit that straightforward response. I like to do an activity where I'm thinking about abstract thinking in terms of themes. So in this activity here, the example that they use is that they're going to present up to 6 words that all have something in common. And as soon as you figure it out, they would say what it is. So this particular example, the clinician would say apple, bananas, oranges with 5 seconds in between. And their goal would be to identify that common theme as being fruit. And I kind of wanted to, just for fun, try this with with all of you here today. So the prize here will just be bragging rights. So if you do want to play, unmute yourself just for this one. I'm just going to list off one word at a time, and somebody on this call, I'm just going to go until somebody gets it. Please tell me what a commonly recurring theme is. So assuming you're all paying attention, DiMaggio, Ramon,
Baseball.
Stalin, Biden, Rogan, Montana, Gordon Levitt.
Joe.
Joe, there you go, famous Joes. Just an example of a fun way that you can work on abstract thinking with your clients. And it's simple, it's engaging, and a good way to work on cognitive processing that way. So whoever said Joe there, good job. You get bragging rights here with this group. Similarly, you can also work on abstract reasoning in terms of categories. So one of the things that you can do with your clients is to get them to write down a bunch of categories. So for example, they provide school supplies, sports bag, closet, kitchen, refrigerator. And your goal is to go through these items one at a time, and they'll say to you what category falls under. So, you know, if you say milk, the client will say refrigerator, spoon, kitchen, and so forth. So just another way that I wanted to show you for you to be working on cognitive processing while also doing physical activities at the same time to really get the maximum benefits of all the things that we talked about with physical exercise. And now we're adding targeted cognitive training with this. That's the last slide that I have prepared for the factors that affect these event-related potentials. And so I wanted to talk about the scan of the week, but I just want to quickly give a chance for anyone who has any questions about anything we talked about to speak up, if anyone has any questions. And if not, we can go right into the scan of the week. We'll go into the scan of the week. So here, this particular scan, a few of you may have seen it before. And this is because it's our first brain camp. I just wanted to start with something that really helps you wrap your head around what it is that we're seeing in these scans. And this one scan is a really good scan for you to get an idea of what a NeuroCatch report can and should look like. So I just want to quickly talk about what each one of these are again, and just with what we might see and some of the things that we might look for. So again, the N100, pre-attentive perception of sound. And here you can clearly see that there's a real good dissociation between the standard and the unexpected condition. You can see the real dissociation of the two tones, as well as a smooth waveform that's being that you can see here. There's no glitches or other artifacts that may affect the smooth output that's being formed. So in addition to the shape of the waveform that we discussed, we also want to look at the amplitude and the latencies. So here, I made this one more to represent the case study. So sorry, I didn't talk about that part first, but we're looking at a 22-year-old healthy female. And the reading that we're getting with this particular scan, we get an amplitude of 19.29 microvolts. So a large amplitude, right? We're expecting a range of 2 to 20. And as a clinician, and you have to begin to think critically, okay, well, what does that mean? And is that large amplitude a cause of something, or does that show a strong neuronal network that fires in sync to create that large amplitude? And because this individual is a healthy 22-year-old, that large amplitude it can be seen as a good thing. It means their neurons are firing in sync. Whereas if this person happened to be, this is her first scan, but, say if her first scan was at a much lower amplitude, and then she sustains a TBI and then comes back and sees that really large spike in amplitude, then you begin to think about what might be causing that and how you can treat this individual to make sure that they can calm down and get the adequate rest needed before engaging in light activity before progressing. So again, going back to the waveform, a real clear P1, N1, P2 complex, smooth downward wave pattern, clear distinction between the waveforms, and a good latency. We're expecting between 80 to 200, and we're showing, I think 106 is what I'm seeing there. And again, a large amplitude, which is good because the subject here is healthy. The P300, we're getting, this again is that all paradigm, what we call the AHA response, your ability to pick out deviant tones. And as you can see, that deviant tone, that louder tone that we hear elicits a larger response. And again, we're looking for that dissociation and differentiation between the two tones, between the quieter tone and the louder tone. You can see that it's a nice smooth wave pattern. A good quick latency, 274 milliseconds. It's called the P300 because on average, we're expecting it to take about 300 milliseconds to get to that part of the brain where we're processing these tones. So here, this individual is faster than average, and again, showing a nice large amplitude, which signals that her neurons are firing together well in sync. Lastly here, the N400. This is that semantic processing that we talked about, and it's elicited using priming. Exposure to one stimulus influences a response to the subsequent stimulus. So when you hear bread, butter, the next time when you hear bread, computer, your brain is going, okay, wait, that didn't sound right. Can we clearly see that your brain is taking that action of processing this to be different? You can see that differentiation again between the two conditions. Amplitude is again, nice large amplitude. We're expecting between 1 to 10. Generally speaking, the amplitudes for the N4 are a little bit lower, but here, again, we're showing that this young, healthy university student is in that kind of prime state of her brain's optimal performance. And of course, the latency of showing 392, we're expecting 400 milliseconds as the name N400 implies. So there's so many good things to like about this scan. And personally, when I began practicing interpreting results, I always like to look back to the scan to just get a good idea of what it is that we're looking for, how things should look. And the analogy that we always use is that it's like taking a blood pressure for your brain, right? And if our blood pressure on average is 120 over 80, this scan here, this is some 115 over 75 type of stuff. And this is kind of the result that we want to see and that we want to get to, and that we want to form a stable response to reflect something like this. So I thought with our first scan being, with our first brain camp here, I wanted to bring forth the scan of the week where people get a good understanding of what things can and should look like. I'm just going to open it up to the group here. If there are any questions about this or any comments about the scan that they wanted to mention, this would be a good time.
And to add that each time we do a brain camp, you're welcome to submit a scan of the week. If you have a scan that you're unsure about, or you want to use as an example for one reason or another, or put into context for the learning of the rest of the group, we're certainly happy to have those.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. That's a great point. I will always be prepared with a scan. Moving forward, I'll try to provide a scan of the week. We're looking at scan at different time points to see how it's changing over time. Especially since I said it's really hard to gauge an individual's results by one scan. You always want multiple scans. So even having said that, I brought forth one that was just an individual scan because it was such a good scan, and I want us to all get an image of what it can and should look like. So as Tanya said, moving forward, if you want to submit something that we want to talk about as a group, please let me know their age, their diagnosis, how far they're removed from their diagnosis, and the type of presentations or symptoms that they were reporting that day to help us get a better understanding of what we're seeing. So thank you for that, Tanya.
And then the other thing that I wanted to raise to the group, if there aren't questions about the scan, is just that the brain and business sessions are oriented towards how do you build a brain health business. So although we could certainly talk about scans as well, I thought what might be interesting for the group is to talk a little bit about business planning and talking about different case studies of businesses and how they've grown a successful brain health business that we can all learn from. And as a physiotherapist and business coach for healthcare businesses, I'm happy to support you in your initiatives to build a brain health business, or how to use NeuroCatch most efficiently and effectively in your practice to be a viable entity or segment of your business. So I look forward to that.
Awesome, thank you for that, Tanya.
Can I have a question? So would you say that higher amplitude, or have the amplitude in the higher range is better in general?
So I'll answer that question by saying it depends on what you're looking at. So always think about what that person is going through in terms of their injury and how far removed they are from their injury. So for example, since I work with concussion clients, I'm going to use concussion as an example. If somebody suffers that traumatic brain injury in that acute phase, we're going to, generally speaking, we expect an uptick in amplitude. So we expect that amplitude to get larger in that short period after a concussion. So in that sense, where that signals that brain, or that person's brain, is in that hyperactive, hypersensitive state where they're having to recruit more neurons to do the same job. So if somebody is in that acute phase of a concussion, then that large amplitude is probably not a good thing, right? But if somebody is in their chronic phase and years removed from their car accident or whatever that may be, and they show a really small amplitude, and with training over time, their amplitude starts to get larger, then great, that means their neuronal network is firing more in sync. So I don't want to say large amplitude good or large amplitude bad. It really depends on your client, their type of injury, how far they're removed from their injury. I hope that answers your question there, Marcella.
Thank you. Yeah.
And as a physio, I think certainly with the noise, the amplitude can be a flag, or with the N100, the high amplitude can be a flag of something that's not functional for them. But certainly with the N400, I love to see improvements in the synchrony of firing and their cognitive processing. So with the N400, I typically love that trend of a higher amplitude. And same with the P300. So it's not just the height, but also the slope. So I also look for a slope that's increasing so that their brain is responding quickly and more synchronously as their neurons start to fire together more consistently.
Yeah, thanks for that adage there. Yeah. Is there any does anyone have any other questions or comments? Oh, actually, I want to pose a question to the group, and that just has to do with the time of this brain camp. So we tried to make it more accessible to people on both sides of the country. So these brain and body ones, we're doing it at 9 a.m. Pacific, and the next brain and business will be at 12 p.m. Pacific, so 3 p.m. for the East Coasters. If this time happens to be, in the way for you to provide treatment for your clients, or if it seems okay, I just wanted to get some quick feedback on whether this time works out for you. And if you don't want to answer me now, you can always send an email to any one of our teammates that you're working with to just to request a time change, or just confirm with us that this time is working. So yeah, some feedback would be great. As well, if you can include in that feedback of what went well this first brain camp, what are some things that you want us to focus on in future brain camps. That would be really appreciated from our team. It's really valuable that we get your input so that we can make this time most valuable to you.
Yeah, topic ideas would be fantastic. I think that we want to make sure that it's of the greatest potential value, also recognizing that different people have different things, but also making sure that we choose the themes that are most universal for you. And certainly we can also help support you with some one-on-one coaching if you come up against a specific situation that may not be relevant to the rest of the group. We're happy to be here and be a support system for you. And just to echo what Sean said earlier about making the topics fairly general, it gives us lots of room to talk about nuances of different topics. And also really the purpose of this is to talk about the neural catch, but also just to talk more generally about applied neuroscience and different ways that you can weave it into your business offerings.
Exactly.
Any questions about any of that? And our goal is also to make them really interactive. so we're going to work on that. We may pose some questions to the group or do a little bit of polling just to make sure we're not putting you to sleep.
Yeah, thank you for that. It may have to do with me just, requesting everybody to have put yourselves on mute. There was just some background noise, so I did request that. But in the future, assuming there's not a lot of background noise or feedback, I would love for this to be really interactive. This is a great opportunity for us to all learn, including ourselves. So yeah, more interaction, the better. And of course, feel free to send this invite out to teammates of yours. The more, the merrier. And the more contributions we get, the more that we can all learn from each other. So yeah, if no one else has any comments, we can end the first brain camp. Thank you again so much for attending. I will make sure that I send you that document with the selective attention recording that you can help train selective attention with your clients. I'm sorry that part didn't work out, but I'll email that to you today so that you can give it a listen and try. So yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in. Tanya and Stephanie will be leading the Brain and Business in 2 weeks. So looking forward to seeing you all there. Thanks everyone. Bye now.